Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dudes Talking episode 43 on the We've Read the Documents channel. I am your host, John Brisson. Have here with me today esteemed researcher LB Bork from packinlaw.us. And today we're going to discuss the trap known as libertarianism and how it pulls truthers and like-minded people who believe that the third party is, the Libertarian Party is a viable party for them to believe will get any change done in the United States of America, and how they are controlled just as much as the Democrat or Republican parties. How are you doing this afternoon, Mr. Bork?
Fairly well, John. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, of course. So you and I have discussed how libertarianism, like you put in this paper, how it's kind of like a catch-22. How it sounds good in paper, right? I mean, it sounds limited government. Many people on the right may like the sound of that. Less government regulations, less government. Less maybe for non-interventionalists, less funding into the military, like Ron Paul would discuss. Now, I'm a non-interventionalist myself, but I'm just saying that might be a platform of some of the Libertarian Party. But it does appear on most services that libertarianism it seems to pivot more to like leftist beliefs, which is why the Libertarian Party is a joke in the modern history of the United States, especially with the last election of Gary Johnson and CMP, Iran-Contra person who was involved in Iran-Contra, William Weld. It was a joke. It seems to be pushing more to the left, kind of like leftist libertarianism, freedom for all. And we'll talk. We'll discuss of how that it's a trap, how it has many ties to communism and socialism, and how objectivism, which is like the philosophical view of Ayn Rand, how that all goes into do what thou wilt. Let's start with that, Mr. Bork, as far as how libertarianism, how it draws people in and makes them, how they're trying to fight for less government. They see how horrific things that the government has done over 9/11, for example. So when you first joined the Truth Movement, you kind of moved to think about libertarianism. The snake flag, don't tread on me. So people start thinking
hmm
about that and how that's just another trap of the left-right paradigm to draw people in.
Right. Should we lay some groundwork for people that may
Yes, of
not
course.
have listened to what I'm about?
Yes.
Um, I got into this a while back, meaning politics, but really wasn't into politics. It was more into the law end of this, and that's how I became an aficionado at what I do. And it's looking from the outside, looking into what's going on or what's transpired. The last several months, I've had a gentleman named Mike Gaddy on my program, The Ultimate Remedy, which airs on Revolution Radio. It's revolution.radio. It's on at 6 o'clock Eastern Time today, if anyone would like to listen. We're going to be talking over my book. We're going to start looking over the book I wrote about 20 years ago. But the book encompasses the 14th Amendment, and Mike's work encompasses more the founding of the Constitution and the fraud that was laid down there. The reason I took the 14th Amendment as a starting point for my work was there was a remedy that was found in a political type remedy that's found in the amendment itself, and that happened during the so-called Civil War, or after the Civil War, and a thing called Reconstruction. And in all that, the Constitution being a fraud in the first place, or a device to pull many countries together into one to benefit the elite, is what the whole process was. And that's what Mike's research has uncovered. he's trying today or right now to tie Madison in with Hamilton in a conspiracy to, basically commandeer the Constitutional Convention of 1787 and, take over all the states from the Articles of Confederation, which were the founding document. But people didn't vote back then that much. They just lived on the land and minded their own business, so to speak, in their own, did their local farming. Thomas Jefferson, who was one of the founding fathers, I call him less of a founding frauder as Hamilton and Madison, for example. And, but I guess the whole thing is this has been a scam since day one, and it just progressed. And everyone knows the word progressive, which in my definition of a progressive is just progressing to the New World Order, which is world communism. Anyone that's involved in politics today is a progressive. I don't care what party they are or whatever. The whole system politically is geared to advance communism. And so you can't fix what's meant to be broken. So back to the law end of this, politics is going to be totally Marxist or communist, the advancement of the New World Order. As we're going to talk about today, libertarians, they are basically maybe fighting against some of these things and looking for people to be free, but the freedom comes in law, not in politics. So I guess we can go from there with this.
Discussion. You would agree with me, Mr. Bork, that the founding fathers and the Constitution that many people in the truth movement upheld, it was a basic frame, in that there was some good in it. But however, many of the founding fathers were deists, they were Masons, right. And that the founding of this country is at basis a grand illuminist experiment, so that they could give us the freedom for men to succeed, and then give and take, give us more freedom, take away our freedoms, to the point where it's like you said, it's constantly progressing. The world order is constantly progressing and gaining ground from the United States almost since its very inception. Right. The takeover of the world order of the United States, and kind of like I've said, the old I guess trope of putting a frog in cold water and slowly turning up the temperature.
Right.
And that seems like that's how it's been over the many years, to the point where they've changed some things for the good, but most of it is for the bad. And so even like you mentioned Constitutional Convention earlier, the Council for National Policy, many people within it are mouthpieces of it. They push for another Constitutional Convention, another con. I'm not saying that the Constitution and the frame of government and everything that we have now is perfect. It's far from it, especially with how many amendments that we've had to the Constitution since then. Some you could argue maybe better needed, some not. But I will say this. One of the interesting things about it is if we had another Constitutional Convention, I'm afraid that they would scrap the complete frame of government we have in now and put something that is total control.
I agree.
Because the people that are in Congress and, that are working for the government, they're not working for our favor. How do you feel about that, Mr. Bork? Because they're always trying to push that. We need another Constitutional Convention.
Well, it's a foot in the door to change the system totally, and it's going to be more socialist if that happens. Mike Gaddy and I both agree that that's got to be stopped somehow. People today, even the politicians, are more ignorant than ever. They have no idea what freedom is. I wrote a paper a while back. I finally got tired of this liberty freedom debate. What's the difference? So I wrote a paper on liberty, and that's where libertarian is derived from too also. Liber, Liber, means free, just simply free in Latin. So that word is incorporated into a lot of things. So you got to be careful of it, as I found out. But anyway, back to the question you had. The Constitutional Convention is not a good thing at this time. It's got to be stopped. Based on people are socialized, they're socialist, and it's the socialism is basically just a device to bring people into the control of government. It looks good on its face to a lot of people, but really it's the opposite of freedom. People used to roam the earth and not be controlled by a central authority, be they a king or a queen or or like the Roman system government. So that's what we're looking at. It's totally, a system of control. And as Karl Marx said, socialism is the base for democracy. And as far as I'm concerned, the word democracy, when you hear that today, is just a secret code word for communism, based on that. And other
We're supposed
communists.
to be a constitutional republic, are we not? And
Yeah, it's still there. I live under a thing called Republican freedom, and that's a deep subject also. If you look at the word Constitution, it's a combination of two words. This is my analysis, just like I pulled apart liberty, and we'll go over that in a second. But Constitution is made up of two words: confidence and institution. And a lot of people understand, confidence games. They're a con job. That's basically what it is. It's swindle. An institution is just the development of the government, or a institution like just a mental institution, for example. Not to say that, well, we are kind of under a mental institution of sorts,
yeah,
but but it's a thing created or formed. So the institution they formed is basically a con job, and they did it without the consent of the people. In democracy, in a true pure democracy, people vote in totality. That a people, be they a town or a state or whatever would be, they vote for what's put in place, be it a law or the documents, like the Articles of Confederation, for example. That has never been done in the United States. They've always been put in place by uh, elitist. So they had to con people into supporting their institution, is basically what a constitution means. So everyone's agreeing to support this thing ignorantly. And as a matter of law, you have to be fully aware as a man or a woman to what's going on. And they couldn't do that with full disclosure. So it's a con job in that way, that they get people to participate. And even before the Civil War, no one was really participating by voting. That's the ultimate agency agreement between a man and the government, is voting. And then there's the other two factors are people participate by taking benefits from the entity, meaning government, or they're silent. Some of these people that think they're doing good by not participating in voting are still subject to this government, mostly based on the socialist aspects, like Social Security number, the main example. So everyone's subject to this government in one way, shape, or form. And my research discovered, written into Section 2 of the 14th Amendment, that it's actually a crime to vote, because to get people to stair step into this communist Marxist system, the advancement of, like I said, progressivism, they had to destroy the international aspects of each state being a country and create this one nation under fraud to get people to participate. So they had to have them rebel against that system, which Mike Gaddy has already established that, it's a con job, it's a fraud. But to break the international law aspects of the Union under the Constitution, they had to get people to rebel to create this, one nation thing, which is basically communism. If you go back into the Communist Manifesto, Marx said the communists are, one of the things they want to do is do away with countries and nationalities. So they got rid of the 50 that are in place right now with the 14th Amendment, technically. So each of the states are now, kind of like quasi counties of the federal government or the
As
United
we've further
States.
gotten away from the Constitution, states' rights have been eroded
Right.
by the federal government
Correct.
since its inception. And in doing so, you went from having many different states who are loosely collected into a union of states where the states' rights were still supposed to be upheld over the federal government's rights,
Right.
to that being over time completely opposite.
Right.
And so on myself, I am a nationalist in that I do believe that the United States should be governed by itself and not a governing body like the United Nations, for example. I'm not a globalist. I do think that borders exist,
Right.
for a purpose. They may, some people may argue that they may be, fictional, kind of like time on a clock. But you got to draw the line somewhere, to
Mm-hmm.
have countries. And, the globalists and the world order definitely push towards more of a one world government.
Mm-hmm.
On both sides, this Council on Foreign Relations, you get globalism and secularism and communism. The Council for National Policy, you get a theocratic one world government where they claim it is ran by God. I don't think that is the
No.
case. So you're getting it on both sides. So libertarianism, you would think, since it's more about self reliance and personal freedom, that they would at least recognize borders, right?
Right.
Well, they don't
Right.
because of laissez-faire capitalism and free trade.
Right. Which is the whole con job behind libertarianism. It gets back to the purpose of centralization is what you're talking about. That's the crux or the main element of Marxism or communism is centralization of many units of governments into one, like you said, the United Nations. By the way, if someone's preaching world citizenship, be aware of them. They're probably an operative. Uh, that's the same thing as what they did with the 14th Amendment. They created this federal citizenship. So it was the unifying of many citizen types into one. So that's just another progressive stair step to this world communism plot that they have going on. So what happens with that is you have a legislature that, like the Congress, for example, that can write laws on people where it didn't have that power before. So the United Nations, world government will be doing the same thing. So if you go to another country and you do something that's outside the realm of public law, which covers people without private law, they could do anything to you. They could stick you in a prison, a world prison, for whatever they decide is unlawful or illegal in this case. That's the difference between legal and a law system. That's what happened with the 14th Amendment or world communism. If you go back and look at your country's history in the mid 1800s, you'll find out that they put an overlay of law or a legal system over everything in the world to create this world communistic system. And that's what they did with the 14th. That's how they did it in Americas with the 14th Amendment. It gave them the base to create this new legal system. And the maxim of law that covers that is sometimes the law sleeps, but it never dies. So that's where the Republican freedom comes from in America. You don't have to participate in this fraud, this con job that they did with the 14th Amendment. So the Republic's principles are still there. And the reason they put it in place is, one, like I said, they can't do what they're doing without the consent, of the governed, as far as, agreeing and having full disclosure. That no one has that. They never had it. So they put this device in called republicanism, or a Republican form of government, to save people that take the time to want to be free, not under liberty. Liberty's freedom with control mechanism. That's what I wrote in that paper. Liberty is not freedom. But so there is the tool or the device to be free in America at this time. But most people are choosing the Marxist system based on ignorance, I would say. And a lot of people, I think, are afraid. Would you agree,
Yeah,
John,
yes,
with that?
yes, I would, Mr. Bork, and a couple of points on what you're talking about. Any time that the world order, puts us under any frame of government, whether it's the Constitution, whether it's the Bill of Rights, whether it was amendments afterwards, especially with the amendments, the way they word things within those amendments in and of themselves, is what you have to watch out for. The 14th Amendment, yes, on paper, it was to give the African Americans, to abolish slavery and the
Mm-hmm.
right to vote. But the issue with that is with the world order, we know that it can't just be only that. It can't only be with the amendments as far as slavery is concerned. It can't only be that's involved with. So, with anything, they'll make something sound good on paper, but it's not going to be that. So, I mean, that's one of the main issues that we have, especially eventually with them establishing the income tax, for example, which you and I have talked about on a previous stream. That as a nation, a nation should make its money on tariffs only,
Right.
or any type of sales or excise tax, not on taxing a person's direct income.
Right.
And
Which is their property.
yes, or any type of even property taxes for that matter. So with the 13th Amendment, you have the abolish of slavery, and then with the 14th Amendment, you have making former slaves, American citizens, and giving them citizenship rights and equal protection. But in reality, it's to put it in. It's kind of to pivot from a constitutional republic to a democracy, to pivot from a loose collection of states by a weak frame of a federal government to a strong federal government. So with all the amendments, you get more and more with the wording that it's giving you, thinking it's actually giving it something to you, but it's not. It's just a further way of restricting freedom.
Right.
I mean, some people could argue like the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote. And some people argue, well, women don't deserve the right to vote. Some people argue that they do. But I can see that even within the wording within the 19th Amendment, or even the amendments further, even the prohibition, whatever, they are on paper, it sounds good. 19th Amendment, women right to vote. But is it only just that, I guess, is what I'm saying? Or is there language within the amendments in and of themselves that are nefarious?
See, that's what people don't understand. That the 15th and the 19th Amendment, the 15th gave blacks the right to vote. It really didn't give them the right to vote, because if you read the language of both the 15th and the 19th, the women's right to vote, so-called, that it says it shall not be denied. So their right comes from something else, which is the 14th Amendment. They're just proclaiming that it shall not be denied. It doesn't give them the right. The 14th does.
Yeah, it just means you can't stop them, but it doesn't
Right.
give them the right to vote.
Correct. So that's a con job in itself. But back to the slave issue, Mike Gaddy has brought up in some of my recent shows or programs. I don't like calling them shows because a show is like entertainment, and that's what most people look at talk radio as, is entertainment. I'm here to advise and educate people. It's not for entertainment purposes, you know. Um, but anyway, this Mike brought forth that some of the people that were involved in the Constitutional Convention, the original one in 1787, actually wanted to do away with slavery then because they said it will come back to bite us if we don't, and it surely did. I think they did that on purpose so they could progressively do what they did with the 14th Amendment and create the Civil War to use the slave issue as a tool to do so. And a lot of people kick that around still to this day that, oh, the 14th or the Civil War wasn't about uh, you know slavery. It was about states' rights, and I have to agree with that. It is about states' rights because the federal government forced by war something on the states that they had the right to do if they wanted to do it. Have slavery, which I don't agree with it. I have the theory that they brought the slaves over here to do exactly what they did. Um, and you see the same people that were making money bringing slaves over, the same people that basically created the Civil War. So, that's a conspiracy theory, if you will, but I believe it to be true.
Are we talking about people that may have been in league with Judah P. Benjamin?
Yeah, that name sounds familiar.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there would be some sort of push by the same people who owned the slave ships, at least 12 out of the 13, if I remember,
Right.
and brought them over here would be the same people who would push for the Civil War. And I'm against
Hmm.
slavery myself.
Yeah, yeah, it's not
They,
natural.
the
It's
African
not natural.
Americans, that brought here deserve to be free and part of this our
Hmm.
society. But I find it, very interesting that I mean, you can Lincoln did not want to care less about freeing the slaves. I mean, he
Right.
said the N word quite frequently. Like it was nothing to him. It was about maintaining control of the Union. Um, so and so from that, that's so yeah. I mean, when you look at the 13th or the 14th Amendment of how it was to to make gives freedom to the slaves, supposedly then give them civil rights as citizens within the United States of America, or even the 19th Amendment, like you mentioned earlier, where the text literally is the right of the citizens of the United States to vote should not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex.
Hmm.
It says they can't outright deny them, but that doesn't mean that they're still allowed to vote. That's really, you think you would put in the wording of it, the right of the citizens of the United States, you know, you think you would word it differently, by saying they just won't be denied, that they have the allow to vote, But no, they're not going to put it that way. Um, so I guess something to tie it into the finders real quick. There was a man named Sol Gareth Davis who believed the concept of the world passport. That it was that the world should have no boundaries, that it should have one united passport across the world. And Marianne Petty was very fond of this project. So, that sounds very interesting. Establishment of globalism in the world order, of having one passport that could be issued and used to travel throughout the world, and be recognized by any country.
Hmm.
Another way of dissolving the borders. So, it's very interesting that he has ties in with Marianne Petty, the leader of the Finders cult. And then, of course, I guess circling back to Ayn Rand, she was of Russian Jewish descent, and she comes over and she gives us Randian objectivism, which Randian objectivism, you can pretty much boil it down to a moral system that Rand described ejectionism of herself as the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noble activity, and reason as his only absolute. Well, that seems to me to be antithetical to the teachings of Jesus Christ, Mr. Bork, in my opinion, because we are supposed to care for our community and our fellow man, and not only do what thou wilt, and productive achievement. That sounds very communist, based off of your work. You know what I mean? How much the capitalist system can get out of you. That's what matters the most. Laissez faire, free market capitalism. So it's very interesting that many of the libertarians hold Ayn Rand out, who, in my opinion, was a yes woman, a right woman. She held a cult that told people whom to marry. When she was criticized in the slightest bit, she would excommunicate peoples from her cult. And also, she had a weird admirer or obsession, as one could say, with a famous, or I guess I should say, an infamous serial killer, William Edward Hickman, and that may have been who she based the hero of her novel. I know I'm drawing a blank on the name of Atlas Shrugged. John Galt may have been based off of William Edward Hickman. So I mean, I'm just with him being a murderer. So again, it seems like to me, you have a person of Russian Jewish descent comes over, founds a cult, obsessed with William Edward Hickman, and and works to her works contribute to libertarianism even today, modern day. It seems to me almost like a theosophical, communist, neocon, whatever you want to call it, construct to try to trap people in who get tired of the right-left paradigm. What do you have to say about all that, Mr. Bork?
Yeah, I agree with it. I was just looking up Ayn Rand. Here's the rule. If people make it on television, or like Alex Jones, for example, I never got on Alex Jones. I heard at least 4 instances where people called into Alex Jones, a very popular alternative media person, to have me on his show. He would just sidestep them. I mean, I heard the bullshit, excuse my French, that he gave them to not have me on. He'd overstep them. So I'm sure there was a plethora of others. People like Alex Jones have buried me as far as an entity that is, able to articulate what's happened. So he's an operative, is my point. And my other point is, if you're on television, like CBS, like Ayn Rand was on Mike Wallace, or with Mike Wallace in 1959, she's an operative.
Well,
So
yeah,
you have to be very careful with people that, come into being very successful or popular in the movement, freedom movement, truth movement, because if they do, they're probably an operative. And like I said, I've been buried over the last 10 years. I was popular in the year 2000, but it slowly diminished, and social media, which I basically believe has been a tool of, the elite or the world communist faction to, they've buried it. The original purpose for the internet, based on the .com, com means commercial, or not communism, but commercial. Well, that ties together with it, but it means commercial, entities. So what the internet, my point is, what the internet was originally used for is commercial purposes, to expand business and trade of whoever. And that's what the whole new world communism is based on. And there's different facets, as we covered some of them today so far, but they had to do something and it took them about 10 years. It wasn't until 2008, 2010 until they commandeered the freedom movement and destroyed it. And social media was one of the ways they did it. They started Facebook and Twitter, and now everyone has an opinion. And most people's opinions come from people that have the control of the internet because they have the money. So the whole thing's just a cluster bleep at this point. So not only do you have to listen to maybe someone that has some authority like your show, John, but then you have all these other people that take information from disinformation and misinformation on the internet, and it's divided up over thousands of other people's opinions. So not only do you have to discern to listen to which one you might want to listen to, but you have to go through all these other ones to eliminate them. So it's just a mess. So back to the original point is that these guys control everything. So you got to have real discernment in who you listen to and what you're listening to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're right. It's very. I mean, I would
in another direction. If you
want. No. This is fine, Mr. Bork. I agree with you, and I actually think that the truth movement has almost been co-opted. Oh, sorry about that, Mr. Bork. I apologize. I mute you at the top on accident on Skype. No, I was gonna say I agree with you. No need to apologize for to move it. Moving it into a different direction. But you could tie it back into everything. I mean, I'd actually argue the truth movement has been co-opted almost from its very inception.
Right.
Especially with the murder of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, being a pivot point of conspiracy culture, conspiracy theories that they want everybody to obsess over, almost like 9/11 also being another point of control. Not to say that those events did not happen. I'm just saying that everybody. JFK became a martyr out of his assassination. Where everybody, no one wants to talk about JFK's connections to the world order, and they only want to speak on platitudes of, where there was Scientologist Jim Mars talking about him wanting to return us to the gold standard, which is not correct in the slightest bit. Putting silver in. None of that completely, and abolishing the Federal Reserve. None of that is true as far as Kennedy is concerned. When you really do the research into it, or Kennedy, going to tear the CIA into 1,000 winds, but him and his father, Kennedy's father, and the Dulleses were friends, and how he admired Dulles even to the end, and it's just really sickening. They're framing Trump in the same way as they did Kennedy. And that they're trying to make Trump out to be, just like Kennedy fought against the deep state. Well, Trump's fighting against the deep state too, and it's like, oh, really? Is he really? So you see it on both sides in that regard. It's my belief that the truth movement has been controlled. There's been control operatives and controlling of it by the John Birch Society and the Council for National Policy for many, many, many years before the John Birch Society, the Fabian Socialists. So, and I will say it's gotten really bad over the past 10 years or so. It's really gotten even more difficult with, as Jesse Spots would say, the world order has us on the internet in our individual digital ghettos, where many of us are just, talking into a void, and only certain people hear the truth, and other people will go to Alex Jones en masse, or Jeff Rentz en masse, or someone else like them to get their CMP version of whatever is going to come to them as their version of truth. And that's what we're stuck with. I mean, that's what you get with libertarianism too, because instead of they'll all talk about personal responsibility and freedom, like property rights being one of the most important things, like the rights of one's home, around their house, the rights of a person, but they totally do away with the rights of a state or the rights of a government, how loose they may be. Like they downtrodden on the United States as far as its collective rights to enforce its border. Most libertarian minded people are for illegal immigration, or don't have any problem with immigration, and they don't have an issue. They have or they have issues with the United States enforcing its borders because they believe that it solely rests on the individual and their property rights themselves, which I largely disagree on. If we are going to have a collective state known as the United States of America, then we should be able to enforce our border rights as the property of a collective people. I am not an anarchist. Though am I big government socialist communist either. I think you have to look on an individual case by case basis. But I do believe that the United States should exist as a federal government. But the problem is the power should reside within the states or reside within the local communities even more than it should be with the national federal government in and of itself. What do you think about that, Mr. Bork?
I agree. There's a balance. I'm not a socialist either, but there's some matters that the government should handle, be it state or the federation. By the way, Mexico is also a federation. It's made up of many states. Of course, you have the Russian Federation. That's
Canada.
many states also.
Canada.
Canada's got 4, I believe. Yes. So all these, so-called countries in the world are stair-stepped to the New World Order. And doing away with borders it's just a philosophy where they're doing away. Like it goes back to where Marx said in the Communist Manifesto, the working men have no country, okay? Which means, in essence, they have the ability to go wherever the work is. And that's what they want to do. They want to eliminate the borders so they can use the human resource, the labor of people or peoples to benefit their profits is all that was. So that's what the Communist Manifesto was. It did two things. It was, one, meant to create a massive workforce, which is now blue and white collar workers in the United States, and also destroy the middle class. That was the one thing I saw when I read the Communist Manifesto. And doing away with borders is tied into destruction of countries and nationalities, and what you hit upon, John, in regard to protecting our borders. So back to what I was going to say is the other thing is destroy the middle class. And that's one thing I saw when I read the Communist Manifesto. I said, this is nothing but a blueprint or a plan to destroy the middle class, equalize the lower and middle class, to put all the wealth in the hands of the elite. Because Marx said the middle class is the problem, not the elites. That was a big red flag, pun intended, right there to me. So you have to decipher all these things and connect the dots to what's going on. And again, what's going on is kind of a neo-Hellenism. If you look back in history, the Jews did very well in the Hellenistic society back before Christ hit the scene. So they're just basically created a system worldwide that they benefited from 2,000 plus years ago.
Yeah,
and they've refined it.
It's my opinion that the Christians brought a sense of morality to the world, especially when you're looking at the Roman Empire, of how debauched they were. When they were leaving, for example, kids that they did not want out in the elements to be picked apart by animals, and the Christians would rescue those orphans and take them in. And of course, you had pedestry and gladiator events and I mean, I can go on and on about the decadence and hedonistic and horrible satanic the Roman Empire was. But Christianity was kind of like a rejection of that,
Right.
and kind of put a sense of morality into the world that was
True.
given to us by Jesus. And we've kind of circling back now where that morality is being eroded. Every now and then you'll have little blips where the morality, or what they call the Overton window or the pendulum, swung back. For example, the Christian purity movement of the early 1900s, where they raised the age of consent to 18 and published the Mann Act, or the white slave trade law,
Right.
to prevent against trafficking. So you'll have little blips of morality coming back through, but it won't be as strong as it was since, after Christ. I mean, that's the problem, is they're trying, like you said, the whole Hellenistic philosopher thought of the government and how a country should be ran, of how it was during the Greek and Roman days,
Right.
based on it's pretty much the perfect. It's pretty much, I guess you could say that they Ayn Rand would be very favorable of those time periods of human history, because of her love of Aristotle, for example. It would fit a lot of line in that. So, with Randian objectivism and postmodernism, you get the great Greek and Roman empires at that time. Do what thou wilt, and everything goes. As long as you can get away with it. I guess you could say the same thing in biblical times with Sodom and Gomorrah.
Hmm.
And we're having that now.
Repeat. Yes.
Yes, and it's getting worse. And of course, the Book of Revelation and the New Testament speaks that will happen, and it's obviously happening. Now, I don't know if Revelation at the end of the world is going to happen within the century. And I'm just saying, as far as the world getting worse, well, that part is happening. It's obvious, and collective society of a whole is eroding. So because of that, you're given all of these. You have to look, as always, when you're going to ascribe to a specific ideology or belief, where that belief came from and what it is rooted in. And with
Hmm.
libertarianism, if it's rooted in, Ludwig von Mises and Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman, you got to sit back and you got to kind of think that maybe this isn't for me.
Right.
Especially when you start looking into what these people believe and what they push, and the problems that have come from Randian objectivism within our culture, or the problems that have come through the middle class when it comes to free market economics, Reaganomics, laissez-faire capitalism, and the problems that it has caused, because it's just, or you could say globalism, whatever you want to call it. And the issues that has brought upon the middle class, it has caused us to suffer. And as little Benji Shapiro would want to argue that these things give the ultimate freedom to a person to be able to experience the American dream, I would say that it doesn't, and it causes us to be more poor, for the rich to
Yes.
become richer. And I know you and I aren't advocating the other dialectic that they give you, which is communism and socialism. You either
No.
vote for
That.
Bernie or you vote for Trump. We're not saying that at all. We're saying both systems are just one side of the world, or the same side of the world order, or different sides of the world order coin. It's one complete,
Right.
machination of the beast system.
It
It's just,
is.
you have people arguing, well, we should have, laissez-faire capitalism and free markets over here, and over here we should have complete communism or socialism, or we should have a strong government with unseen regulations, and controlling everything, and states ownership of, like, the oil industry, for example. So you have, both. You have kind of like left and right paradigm. You have people parroting and arguing for both structures, when you and I are standing on the outside and saying it's both part of the same thing. Aren't you guys crazy?
That's right. And back to the Christian issue of what happened after the time. I call him Yeshua. That's a proper. Uh, what language did that come from?
About Yeshua?
Anyway,
That would be Judaism.
Yeshua.
Yeshua.
Yeshua. There was no J back then. That's English, so that's a whole other can of worms to open. But if you look at what happened with the Roman Empire, of course, slavery was prevalent back then. It started to disappear until the Jesuits took over the church, which I call them, it's an agency of the Jews as far as I'm concerned. They infiltrated the church deeper than what they already had with the Jesuit order. And slavery didn't come back into fashion until that happened in the 1500s. And the whites are blamed for it, or the so-called Christians are blamed for it. And it became another problem, as we know, in the United States. So that was another thing that happened. And the Catholic Church is in no way, shape, or form so-called Christian. It's just another evil facet of Luciferianism, or the people that control the world, the so-called enlightened ones that control everything. So I wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the
and
church.
they used it as a tool to take over the United States.
Yeah, it's my opinion that you could look at the church as a tree, and since Christ's death and the beginning of the Christian church, the tree has died in parts over time. That does not mean that the teachings of Christ in the New Testament are not sound. I'm not saying that at all. If you're thinking I'm saying that, then you're hearing me wrong. But I'm saying that Satan has taken over the church the farther that we have gotten away from the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And you see that with the Catholic Church being 100% totally a puppet of Satan. Not to say that there are individual fathers in Catholic churches who are part of this, grand satanic church. I'm not arguing that at all. Or let's say your neighbor down the street who's a Catholic who goes to Catholic Mass. They're not part of a grand, satanic Catholic conspiracy, Jesuit conspiracy. And I'm not saying that. But I'm saying from the Pope and the top of the church down, it has been infiltrated, especially when you have the Jesuit Black Pope, Francis, being the head. And of course, Catholic Church wants me to say that the Pope is infallible. I will not. That's bull. The only infallible human that ever walked this earth was Jesus Christ. Which was the manifestation of God. So I'm not going to sit here and say that if you want to go to church, go to church. But just make sure that you find a pastor that is giving you sound biblical exegesis, sound doctrine. And be very careful when you donate your money. That's all I'm going to say about that. But
I have said, John, recently that I liked, the Catholic Church controlled the United States firmly since the Civil War. I much rather like what was going on in the 1950s compared to right now, because we're shifting into full Luciferianism. And, which is basically getting rid of God in people's lives, or the creator, where man takes over. And as far as I'm concerned, man is Satan. Man is the ultimate, adversary against the creator, in my estimation. We can talk about the demons that people talk about, whatever, or boogeyman called the devil and all this, but ultimately, what the adversary against the creator is man. Like I say, what's the difference between man and animal? Man can destroy the earth. And who is Satan? The enemy of God, the creator. So as far as I'm concerned, all evil comes from man. And it depends how you look at it.
From man and the fallen angels.
Yeah.
And because, God cannot be in the same presence as sin. So, there are many people who say that Michael, like the Mormons, that Michael and Jesus are brothers, which is ludicrous. Or I'm sorry, and also the Jesus and Satan are brothers, which is ludicrous. That God and the devil are one and the same. I do not believe that. And so it's very interesting about that.
Yeah, all these ancient stories from the Bible and such. I don't disregard the Bible, but I have to say that I don't trust most versions of it. It's been manipulated over the years, just like anything else they have done.
I
So you
agree
have to be
to some
careful. You
degree.
have to be careful with it.
There's been biblical interpolation, but I guess we kind of went off topic.
Yeah.
um,
Well, you want to get back to the libertarian issue?
yeah, so
Let me say liberty. The paper, my paper, liberty is freedom is not liberty is not freedom. Rather, it's available at packinlaw.us/ the liberty, Liberty. Um, if you search any documents, you can search them under PAC, then put in the terms. You should be able to pull them up on a search engine pretty easily, or get a listing of all of them. If you put packinlaw.us into a search engine, you'll find my white papers and such. But the thing I found out about liberty is I've always said liberty's freedom with restrictions, simply. And if you go back to what I said about liber, Liber, means free in Latin. There's two terms of in Latin that refer to freedoms. One's libertas and one's liberum. Liberum is more close to freedom. Libertas is more geared towards the civil law, which we're under. So anytime someone says liberty, you're under civil law. And if you go back to the so-called Reformation of the church in the 1500s, Calvin went to Geneva, Switzerland, to write his Geneva Bible, which Switzerland is the only free state, or neutral state rather, in this war called world communism. If you know, Switzerland's where everyone hid their bank accounts and
yeah,
things early on.
very interesting about the Swiss. I do believe that they are a pivoted control country within the world order. I think they're very
Right,
high
they
up.
are.
The
They
Swiss
are.
are, and very few people ever talk about the Swiss. That's what really has me really thinking about them, because very few people ever truly mention the power of the Swiss and that they are neutral. And
Right,
very
they're
interesting that
neutral.
Calvin fled to Switzerland,
Right.
and so yeah, it's the Swiss is something I eventually am going to dive in more on this channel about, and the connections between the Swiss and the world order.
Anyway, what I was going to say is one of the principles or doctrines of Calvin was that if the church, the Catholic Church, had cetus, or it was in the area of any country, that the civil law would control the people. So that's what we have in the United States. It's basically a rebirth of the Roman Empire. And of course, it's a Roman Church, Roman Catholic Church. So that's what they're doing. And so liberty is basically freedom under what the Catholic Church says is freedom.
Yes, yeah, I mean definitely.
Via legislation by their the ruling elite, which Marx said the rulers are the ones who control the communist system.
So
Which,
it's all interconnected into one
oh,
another.
totally.
And then you end up with later on, after Calvin and Luther, you end up with now I'm drawing a blank. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on
Don't be me now. I do
oh
that too
no, I'm
often.
drawing a blank. Modern day I can't, no, I can't think of it. Never mind. Never mind. But I guess with Calvinism, you get you can take it to the far extreme and get dominionism. From that, you can get the doctrine of the elect, that God has destined people to either go to heaven or hell, which I do not agree with.
Hmm.
Total disregarding self will. which I'm not a full self-will type person either, which is I think it's Armenianism if I remember. I think it's somewhere a little bit in between, which they call, I guess, a partial Calvinist. That I believe that God knows everything, and that but it's man's choice of whether he accepts salvation or believes in Jesus Christ or rejects that. Like your names are in the book of life, but they're not predestined to be in that book. And so that's the difference between Calvinism and Armenianism, or what I am. I'm kind of like in between. So yeah, it's very interesting. Calvin, going to Switzerland, and later you get the modern evangelical Christian movement being very heavily influenced by Calvin and
Mhm.
Calvinism. And so yeah, I mean, when we look at the control structures of the world order, you have the Catholic Church, you have the Protestant Church now, the Orthodox Church, all controlled forms of Christianity in differing degrees. And then you have, Zionism. You have different countries vying for power, like the Swiss or the royal family of England. All of them trying to push for one united, one world order, and one united government. And that's what they're pushing. So libertarianism on paper sounds good because you think, oh yeah, well people want to have freedom, they want to have liberty, they want to have self-governance, the right to their own property. They want to be able to have their right to sell them to whoever they want to, their right to free commerce. But again, when you actually dig into how libertarianism was founded, who pushed it, what the true tenets of it are, you realize, just like with everything else, it's just another control mechanism to suck people in.
Yes. So I guess what we're going after is that libertarianism is basically just another a faction of the same, program. And you can't fix what's meant to be broken. They can try all they want with their legislation and all this and that, but as you referenced, John, uh, all their tenants or whatever they're pushing basically feeds the New World Order. So it's just another stealthy, party or group of party, a cult, as you might have called them, that pushes the New World Order, which is, uh, the borderless world that feeds capitalism. Capitalism is the one. Basically, the rule is the ones with the most capital win, and that's what the Communist Manifesto was set up to do. Consolidate everything into the hands of the elite, and eventually the elite will run everything, and there'll be the best man wins sort of thing going on.
Yes.
It's all done. It's all done with law. The 14th Amendment not only did what I said earlier in the program today or broadcast, it also gave corporations power. And corporations are not people. They're, a creation of government or the state. And they can be controlled as such, but the legislation gives them powers instead of suppressing or repressing them. And that is due to the ignorance of the people.
Yes.
And you could turn the system around to be good, but with an ignorant body politic or bodies politic, in the case of the union, that's not going to get done. So my advocation is people need to know the law if they want to be free.
Yes. Yeah, and know that they are being. The first thing is to admit that you were deceived and that you're wrong. The people who
Yep.
believe in the right left paradigm and libertarianism falls into that on both
Right.
sides, and realize that government is not going to save you or even the complete lack thereof, and that they're all corrupt from president down, and
Yes.
the voting's a scam, Again, as you've talked about in your work, it's actually illegal. And then
Well,
from
they
there,
set people, what they did is set people up to be criminals to fulfill Plank 4 of the Communist Manifesto, which dictates that they take property away from rebels and immigrants.
yes,
And a resident in international law means a foreigner in a different country. And resident, I've broken that down too. It's res means thing in law, R-E-S, res, that means thing in law. And slaves were considered things, they're property. So when you're calling yourself a resident in international law, you're saying, I'm property. I'm a thing being used in commerce.
yeah,
Oh, and by the way, passports go back to permission to do business in a jurisdiction that's under wartime principles.
yeah,
So, like we talked about, the whole world, the Communist Manifesto. Manifesto means declaration of war. Okay, so the chosen ones, as far as I'm concerned, they put that together. The two men, Engels and Marx, the front man for the tribe. They put this economic war together against the world. Switzerland's the neutral state in this war, and everyone's property and being allowed to travel with their passports from country to country as being so-called free, but they're really slaves being used in a commercial enterprise.
yeah. Yeah, it's really sad that that's how they set up, and that's how they're getting away with it.
Yes.
And people are falling back in for it like they will this election, if I believe to be true, that we're going to see Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. It's going to make more people go to the polls more than ever.
Yes, that you and I both agree that if Hillary got in, we might be better off. They put people to sleep with Trump.
Oh yes, they did. People fell back in. I'm saying for this upcoming election, I think there's going to be broker convention. I think Hillary's going to be put back up for round two. And they're going to get people to vote in record numbers more than ever to fall back in for the con job. Like you said earlier, I agree that I think as much as I detest Hillary Clinton and her politics as a
Right.
conservative, I do believe that if she was elected president, then half of the conspiracy-minded people, or more or less, would not have fallen asleep to trust the plan as Q says and look at Trump as a god emperor. And in doing so, people were lulled back to sleep while the world order continued marches on.
Right.
If anything, I guess a counter argument to that is you've made, or other people, friends of mine have made, Trump may have bought us some time. I don't know. I think we're still marching on. I think
Yes.
things, with the trade deal with China, with the NAFTA 2.0, with the First Step Act, with the laws against anti-Semitism on college campuses, with the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, with the wars in the Middle East still raging on, with us still giving aid to Saudi Arabia. I mean, do I have to continue? The wheels of the world order are still turning, people. All right, they're
Yeah,
still happening.
we could talk for days on these subjects.
Trump didn't slow that down at all.
No,
He just
no,
put a fresh coat of paint on it to deceive the masses.
that's right. I've said he's maybe done some things to hamper world communism, but he's done absolutely nothing to stop communism in America. By the way, all the planks of the Communist Manifesto have been effectively applied in America for at least 50 years. So that they progressively did it under the 14th Amendment system.
Yeah, and we'll definitely see with the re-election of Trump, when Trump does get re-elected. That is supposedly is what the world order is pushing. Get ready for ramping up of stuff that you've never seen. I believe the economy may likely, what must go up must come down. That stock market's got to come down eventually, does it not? They can't keep propping up and quantitative easing forever. So we're going to see the economy crash, and we're going to see a potential war with Iran, or within Latin America like Venezuela or North Korea.
Yeah,
because they want it. They need it for the economy.
what
So,
people have to that's the crux of what I believe happened. It's in the document, Mises document. Ludwig von Mises, Just Evil, is the document at packandlaw.us / Mises if you want to read that. But the crux of what they've done is they've stolen our local and our family and local economies, and they have to be gained back. So if you people, gain anything from this broadcast, you should be working with local people to start building local economies and thwart any imports and things of that nature to start getting control back of our economies.
yes, your local farmers markets,
Right.
your local markets, charity should begin locally.
Hmm.
Especially believers in Christ, Christians. We are supposed to begin our charity locally within our community, as
Yes.
Christ has ordered us to do. So yeah, I mean, building those, and that's what one things the world order has done, is destroyed our relationships with our neighbors, with our communities. Because
Big
if we
time.
had that, they wouldn't be as powerful, and they wouldn't be able to get away with all the atrocities that they do as much. Not saying that it would stop it completely by any shape or imagination, but we'd be better off as the United States of America if we were back to, caring for one another and helping one another and supporting one another locally,
Hmm. Yes.
and instead
And
of
that's
buying all
the
our stuff from China.
yeah,
So,
that's the reason they use the immigration today, is to break things up, because a divided community is not going to work together. And that's the purpose of the elimination of borders and the import of different people into the United States at the rate it's been the last 20 years, especially. They're destroying the backbone that was once America to
yeah,
complete to continue this new world order, as they call it, or world communism, as I call it, because that's what they call it.
and Pressure 609 asks in the chat, what happens if they do begin arrests? If you are a disciple of Q, or if you believe in Q, I don't think those arrests. If the sealed indictments are real, okay, let's live in fantasy land for a minute and think that they're all real, okay. If they are, those sealed indictments are not for the government structure or the world order and power. They might have a few pawns here and there. Harvey Weinstein goes to jail, people shut up. Roger Stone goes to jail, people shut up. Paul Manafort goes to jail, people shut up. You see the picture here? They might throw us a couple of people, or a couple of scapegoats, as they
Right. Well,
call
they
it.
call useful idiots, or cannon fodder, as I call them. And people have to understand that this deep state stuff is not the shadow government. The deep state is just a ploy to get people thinking that they're fixing the government,
But
but
they're not.
they're throwing people to the wolves to
Yes,
make it look like they're doing something.
but if
The
these,
shadow government still is doing
oh,
its thing.
oh God, yes, and if these sealed indictments are real, they're for people like you and I, Mr. Bork. As
Well,
Alex Jones has now flipped and said that the FEMA camps were not for the dissidents of the Latin American Civil War that the Council for National Policy wanted to happen during the 1980s, that they were for the destabilization of Latin America and all of the refugees that would have came from Nicaragua that the globalists were supposed to do. Now, it wasn't the CNP through the Contras trying to destabilize the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, but it wasn't for the dissidents of that war, like family members, like how it was during the 60s and 70s when they're protesting in the Vietnam War. It wasn't for that. It was for those illegal immigrants or refugees that came across the border. And that anything you believe otherwise is globalist propaganda. Alex Jones will be the first to march people like me and Mr. Bork and people listening to those re-education camps.
I
If
don't know.
if the hammer drops and that is real, and that's just not another fear mongering propaganda, we don't know. But if that is real, we're the enemies of the state,
I'm not.
not your liberal family members, not the politicians, that are like Hillary Clinton or Barack Hussein Obama. They're not going to prison. It'll be us.
Yeah, well, I have faith in the law, and I watched what they write in the statutes and the executive orders, and it applies to people that I'm not. So let me read the Republican Freedom comment by Justice Black of 1967. It showed up in a case called Adderley versus State of Florida. He said the chief enemies of Republican freedom are mental sloth, conformity, bigotry, superstition, credulity, monopoly in the market of ideas, and utter benighted ignorance. So I've corrected my status. I'm no longer a national of the United States. I'm a national of Illinois. And if these guys fulfill the promise that George Bush set forth back to Congress and the United Nations back in
The New
1991,
World
I think it
Order.
was. Yeah, he says they follow the rule of law, not the law of the jungle. So that fits right into this. The people with mental sloth, conformity, bigotry, superstition, which is belief in, basically, they look at the Bible as superstition, and I believe it's a law form, but they use it to their advantage in many cases. Uh, they're in control of the world, so the point is, I follow their law, and they Bush's promise was that they follow their law. So the people that know their law and can get around it will. And I just look at all these people who have gone to prison over the years. I wrote the book, The Red Amendment, that will take down this government if people are to take it serious, and they've left me alone. All they've done in the last 20 years that I've seen is put out more boob bait for people to follow. Instead of listening to me, they just distract people with boob bait and do other things.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to say, Mr. Bork, as we close?
No, I'm just, sorry, I'm being honest.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if there's anything else that you wanted to end with. People in the chat love the stream.
Yep.
Um,
Anyway, there's one more thing I want
yes.
to ask you, John. You know who came up with this statement, you can't fight City Hall?
I don't know who did, but I've heard it.
Yeah, City Hall did.
Yeah, I guess is a way so that you can't fight them. To kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, huh?
Right, right. Just remember that one, folks.
Yes, definitely. All right, Mr. Bork, I want to thank you for having you on. We'll definitely have you on again soon.
Thank you, John.
Anytime, sir. Bye. All right, that's it for this episode of Dudes Talking. I want to thank Mr. Bork for coming on. Definitely check his website, packinlaw.us. I'm going to have Mr. Bork on again in the future. Tomorrow I'm going to have Lee Veltman on for a very fun stream. Make sure everyone's there. It's going to be around 12:15, 12:30. Strap in. Have you been cued? We're going to talk about the Q movement and whether or not you should trust the plan. Lee is very much a historian on Q. It's going to be a discussion. Some of it's going to be a friendly debate. But overall, Lee and I agree way more than we disagree on. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting. We're gonna give different parts of the Q movement. I'm gonna talk about the Ramtha School of Enlightenment and J.Z. Knight. Early involvement of the Q narrative being as early as the 1990s, being put into the public consciousness and truthers. So that's going to be very interesting. And then we're going to move on. Lee is going to talk about the Q Patriots and how it was started then. And then I'm going to probably discuss the Council for National Policy's co-option, or maybe they even started at the very beginning. With the involvement of the Flynn family, with the involvement of Jerome Corsi. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion tomorrow with Lee. And will say this, I do believe that there are patriots out there, and we'll talk about it tomorrow with Lee. who really do think that they are doing what is best for the United States of America and doing best for their communities who believe in Q. And to those people, I'm not disparaging you. You have just been sold a false bill of goods. And you need to realize that it is um, um, it's not accurate. That Trump is not our guy, and that you should move on from that, and speak the truth. And that's why I'm so appreciative of Mark from Houstonic Alive, who was once a disciple of Q, and has realized that the Q is an operation, that it is not to be trusted, and that the promises that Q has made as far as declassification and the Hillary Clinton's one of Q's first drops was that Hillary Clinton was going to be arrested. That none of that is happening. And I believe that a lot of the information about Q is propagated by bots and very few truth-seeking people. And also, maybe I can get Lee to talk about my favorite part of the Q conspiracy, or operation, if you want to call it either one, is R, which is RFK Jr. I mean, RFK Jr. JFK Jr. is still alive. That one cracks me up. I think it's the funniest thing in the world because you have disciples of Q like Jordan Sather or Julian's Rum on Twitter who do not believe in the JFK Jr. R is alive, and then you have other Q people that believe in it, like Jennifer Mack, wholeheartedly push it. So it's very interesting to see issues and arguments within the Q movement. So we are going to discuss that too, or at least I will discuss JFK Jr. because it gives me a case of the giggles. But that's it. I want to thank Mr. Bork for coming on. We agree on most things. Like I don't, there's some people that I agree more with, some people I agree less with. Mr. Bork, I agree with most things. I guess maybe one of the only things being that I do believe Satan, the adversary, is real. But other than that, I mean, he's a Christian. He does great work, and hopefully, we can wake more people up as a collective group together. That is it for this stream. Until next time, always read the documents. We're going to get one last thing. Hopefully, the Democratic debate tonight, if you want some giggles, I definitely suggest watching it. Of course, the last debate did have a question at the very end about a brokered convention and who would support it. The only person who did not support it was Bernard Sanders. But hopefully Jimmy Jean this week and Jimmy Jean from Into the Microcosm, a dear friend of the show. Hopefully we will have Jimmy on and him and I will break down the next Democratic debate for some fun. Till next time, always read the documents. Take care, everybody. God bless you.